So hello, dear friends. I am Marco Fontani. I am product manager and research coordinator at Amped Software. And we are excited to be here today to interview Dr. Cecilia Pasquini. Cecilia is an assistant professor at the University of Trento, where she has authored numerous papers in the field of multimedia forensics, and specifically in topics like authenticity verification of digital images and videos, source identification, creation of datasets for multimedia forensics, and more. Very recently, Cecilia and her group have authored a very interesting study about deepfakes entitled More Real Than Real, a study on human visual perception of synthetic faces. Now, we all know the importance that deepfakes analysis gained in the last 2 years, and we were really impressed by the results unveiled by this study that they conducted. And so we decided to interview her and ask her to tell us more about what she's done. And so here we are today, and the interview will be run by Blake Sawyer. Blake is a forensic video analyst with a long working history in the digital forensic industry, including law enforcement. And Blake has been with Amped since 2 years, more than 2 years now. And he covers sales, technical support, and training in the United States. And so I leave it to you guys. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Marco.
Thanks, Marco.
Hey, Cecilia. So first of all, thanks so much for meeting with us. So Cecilia, you put together a study. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
So the study, in the study, we want to analyze the people's ability to recognize images that are real, so in particular face images that are real, from face images that are generated by latest GANs, so generative adversarial networks. This is because we have observed that technology in this framework has evolved very quickly in the last years. There's basically one GAN every year, and in particular the latest one from 2019 and 2020 really generates images that are particularly realistic. So we created this web-based test, where perception test, where people could log in essentially and being exposed to different kind of images. For each of them, they have to provide a rank from 1 to 7, responding to the questions, this image is synthetic. So 1 was the corresponds to the answer completely disagree, and 7 corresponds to the answer completely agree. So by doing so, we collected many different outcomes related to different images, and a total of around 600 participants from all over the world. And by doing so, we could evaluate how able we still are to essentially detect those GAN-generated images.
I'd love to know a bit more about you. How'd you get into this field?
So, well, I come from a background in applied mathematics. So I got my bachelor and master in math. And in my undergraduate studies, I had the chance to work on image processing already. Then in 2012, I joined the University of Trento with this ICT doctoral program. And then I got to know the field of multimedia forensics, and I started working in the field essentially since then as a PhD student, then as a postdoc, and currently as a researcher in Trento.
Oh, very cool. That sounds really great.
Yeah, I met Marco a long time ago, actually, in this framework.
Marco is everywhere, it seems like.
Yeah, at least in Italy.
So just a little bit about your deepfake technology and your research in general. The term deepfake, it seems a little bit ubiquitous. It means just about anything that's fake content these days. But is there like an actual agreed definition of what a deepfake is?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, there's no like textbook definition of deepfakes, also because it's a quite recent phenomenon somehow. The word, as you said, has been used, probably a bit abused in the last years, to indicate media contents that are doctored, in particular images and videos, and usually referring to material that is depicting faces. This includes like face swaps, when you put somebody's face into somebody else's body, or video reenactment, that is to me even more interesting, is when you transfer a motion of somebody into somebody else's face. And as the word suggests, of course, this is typically, but not necessarily actually, realized through deep learning techniques. In general, AI-based techniques are, however, utilized in this context. Let's say that in general, one could also embrace like a wider definition of deepfakes, where you include, like, in general, realistic digital media, being them images, videos, audio tracks. They're also doing deepfake text and depicting like arbitrary content, let's say. The common trait is that they are, of course, fake. They are not real. They are either manipulated, starting from some pristine material, or completely generated from scratch.
So how do you think deepfakes will change the way we trust what we see online?
Well, I think they already changed it somehow, at least for the people who are a bit more, let's say, digitally literate, in the sense that they come close to this technology. I think we have somehow already raised the bar of what we trust or we buy, like, with no verification. The key, I think, now is to also raise the awareness to that part of people, of population, who doesn't know that this technology exists, and they are probably less familiar with these very subtle manipulations.
Yeah, I can see that. That definitely makes sense. All right. So it was really interesting in your research paper to see that the realism rate was higher in the deepfakes compared to those that were actual images. In fact, in your paper, you wrote, and let me quote this, it said, synthetic faces generated through StyleGANs 2 are judged as more real than real faces. Why do you think that was?
This was actually very surprising for us also to observe, at least very, very striking. So one conjecture could reside in the way GANs work. So GANs are essentially a pair of networks. One generates images, and one other detects, learn how to detect those who are generated by the generator, or those who are real, or at least existing. And this is like a recursive process. So both of the networks improve progressively. The feeling is that, at least for advanced GANs, like StyleGAN 2, for instance, the images that those generators produced are all of them quite, I would say, regular. They present a high symmetry. They depict faces that are somehow ordinary, I would say, with no surprises, let's say. Probably because the surprises that real faces have, like asymmetries or peculiarities, might be spotted by the detector, which is also an advanced detector. So this is probably the reason why all StyleGAN 2 images, we do not present striking artifacts were for the majority of the cases classified as real. They brought to no suspicious view, let's say.
Interesting. So then, based on your study, what are some elements that are proved to be more useful in spotting a deepfake?
Well, most of the people, at least the people that responded to our optional questions, because we had a lot of participants in our study, and some of them also left optionally those comments. They say that they use, in general, face artifacts, which means probably striking face artifacts like strong asymmetries, which is probably related to the oldest GANs. So the first kind of GAN we considered was back to 2017. And in those cases, we could really see like visual artifacts. Another thing that it's a bit hard to reproduce for GANs are details like hair, for instance, which also holds for latest GAN. And also another element that seems to be pretty successful is the comparison, let's say, of the foregrounds of the face with the background, which also seems not so easy to handle for latest GAN, because they appear a bit artificial still. but this is again something that we do like to investigate more, because if we understand at least what are the weak points for those images, it's something that we might also employ for getting better detectors.
That makes sense. So then symmetry is one of those things, and that's really interesting. So in your conclusion, you say, I'm going to try and quote again. So automatic detectors might not ever work sustainably, given that the way GANs work. Every improved detector can be used as a discriminator and make the next generation GANs evaded altogether. So if that's the case, like other than keeping our detectors private and not really accessible, what are ways that can be used to work with these detections to evade this kind of cat and mouse game?
That's a very tough question, in the sense that I hardly have a clear answer, but I think it's an open, let's say, issue for the community as a whole. For sure, in any adversarial scenario where you have somebody that generates something in this case and somebody that wants to detect it, it's quite natural to model this as a game where you have two players. Each of them can have a set of strategies to play, and this framework can usually also in other problems in multimedia security is modeled as a game through the help of game theory. Game theory is a quite powerful tool that in principle will really allow us to somehow grasp what will be the fundamental limits also of this continuous race. And it's a very powerful approach that I usually advocate. Of course, one of the difficulty of applying this model is to find reasonable models that can actually represent the complexity of the real scenario. So on a more practical level, I think ways like to mitigate this somehow this race could be to approach the problem in its complexity and somehow diversify the clues that one uses, which might also not be just the specific signal of the specific object that you're analyzing. For instance, it's also important to collect a number of information about the object under investigation that you have. Which, for instance, pertains to the source, where it comes from, what is the context where it is used, where does it come from, has it been used before. This, of course, entails an interdisciplinary process somehow that could, I would say, enrich the analysis and somehow mitigate the problem that you say, which is due to the fact that there's a constant evolution of the creation tools.
And then, so one of the funding entities that, for your work was the Premier project. Can you tell me a little bit about the Premier project and what results it's reached so far?
So Premier is an Italian funded project. It's funded by the Italian Ministry of Education and Research, and it involves 5 universities. So mine is the University of Trento, and we have the University of Siena acting as a coordinator, Politecnico di Milano, University of Naples Federico II, and University of Florence. So the main focus of the project is to bring advances in the field of video forensics, which is a bit less advanced, let's say, that the image counterpart, but it's getting more and more relevant as we all know. And in particular, the goals of the project pertains to the advancements of AI-based detection techniques, which at the moment present some limitations, which are not like related specifically to multimedia forensics, but we all know that, like for instance, neural networks, deep learning techniques usually needs a lot of data to be trained, and this might be a problem in many fields. And also, there's somehow a lack of interpretability of the tools that one have. So why a certain CNN is telling us a certain output which part of the image or the video is more relevant for that. All of this requires a set of tools that can give us an intuition of what is actually happening inside the techniques. And another important pillar is the fact that let's always remember that those detectors, if they are public or even if they are not, could be attacked by an informed forger. And so we need to make sure that that we can reasonably defend against the targeted attacks.
Yeah, that's a lot of different facets. So that's a big project. Appreciate all of that work. So premierproject.it is the website.
Yes.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thanks so much for meeting with us. I'm
Thank
sure Marco
you.
wants
Thank
to say
you.
something.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you very
time.
much, Cecilia.
Thank you, Marco. See you around.